So today's video comes thanks to Craig Mack, who put a comment in my last video of what is your message to mix engineers. So these are my 5 top tips from a mastering engineer to a mix engineer. And there is a bonus tip at the end, which is my favourite, so make sure you hang around for that one. So my first tip is something that isn't considered very much, but what I'm looking for, what's better for me to get a better sound, is if you present something with less top and more bottom. The reason being for this is, if I've got more bottom, I'm able to sculpt into the bottom and tighten the bottom up. But if I've got to add to the bottom, I'm adding to what's not there. I'll normally add to the bottom anyway and then push in a bit more if there isn't enough there. But it's better to have it there in the first place in the mix. And also, with that balance thing, to have less tops. So limiters, when you're pushing a mix through compressors and limiters, it tends to get a little bit brighter anyway. So that natural brightness will come through as I'm mastering it. So by having less top on there, it basically compensates and will give me a little bit more sort of brightness as I'm going through the limiters. And also, if there isn't enough top on there, I've got some really lovely analog EQs, so I can add some air in there to come out of the equipment if it's been in the box for the whole time, to come out in a hybrid situation, just to add a little bit of natural air and some noise from the equipment, you know, tubes and stuff. It just breathes a bit of life into the top end. So if I can do that as a mastering engineer, then that always is a better sound than trying to do that in a mix and compromising the mix. So just don't worry about the low end too much. I can kind of tighten that up and sort that out. But the top end don't sort of start going crazy, getting things really bright, because it usually sounds really thin and crispy when it's gone through some limiting and stuff with mastering. So best thing to do is less top, more bass. So my next top tip to a mix engineer is mix into a limiter. So have a limiter on your output so that you can get an idea of how your mix is going to sound when it's been limited, when it's been mastered, because you really want to know, you know, when you're doing compression and when you're balancing the track, how's that going to sound at the end when you've got a brick wall limiter on the end. Now, the limiter I would suggest using is a Fab Filter limiter, the Pro L2, because most mastering engineers use that, but you really want to understand how your mix is going to sound when it goes into a limiter. So just make sure it's on the output of your chain. Now, going on to my next tip, which is give your mastering engineer your demo master, which is the mix that you've done into a limiter. So give him that, because then he gets an idea of the kind of level that you're looking for. But also the main thing that you've got to do is then bypass that limiter and give him that version, and that's the one that he masters from. Because what happens is, if you're mixing into a track and you give him the limited version, all the peaks and all the dynamics are usually crushed and pushed away from your mix into the limiter. So then it's too late for the mastering engineer to get those, sculpt those nicely, and, you know, really craft a really nice sound. But if you give him the version with, or her, with the version without the limiter on, then there's still that opportunity to then put the limiter back on, but also EQ and compress as a mastering engineer will do before the end limiter. And that's when you can grab that extra 20% of, you know, juice, where a mastering engineer can really take the sound to the next level. So make sure that you send 2 tracks, 2 files, which is the limited version, which is your kind of demo master, and the dynamic version, because the mastering engineer then might think, well, actually I can work with the limited version anyway, it sounds pretty good, it's not too smashed, I could probably smash it a bit more and, you know, still get some dynamics out of it. But then they might also then be able to use the dynamic version, so it gives them a couple of options and gets them into the headspace of exactly how you were listening to the mix before you took the limiter off and gave them the opportunity to have a little play around. But that doesn't mean take all of your compression and stuff off of your mix buses and off of your stuff. Leave all that on, because that's part of your mix. All I'm talking about is a brick wall limiter that's going to take the peaks off at the end that you're pushing into. All the compression and things, that is all part of the mix, that's part of the sound. That's something that a mastering engineer can't put on, because it's more of a creative thing between each instrument and the way they're working together, and a balance thing. But, you know, it's just the brick wall limiter at the end, so keep all your compression on. So the next tip is, don't second guess the mastering engineer. Keep it simple. Make sure that you just get it sounding the best you possibly can to your ears. How is it going to sound the best going into this limiter so you can give them the best quality limited file and the best quality unlimited file? Just make sure it sounds the best to you. Don't leave things and think, well, the mastering engineer will get that, you know, I'll do this with the bass because I know he'll do this sort of thing, he'll tighten it up. Don't bother doing that. Just do what is sounding the best in your room. So when you come to then exporting the files to deliver to the mastering guy, really you want to deliver them at the sample rate and the bit depth that you've created the track in. Don't start sample rate converting it, because the mastering engineer will be able to do that for you and give it to you in whatever format you need at the end. It's best to just come out as clean as you can. So if you've made it at 48K 32-bit float, then keep it at that and give it to the mastering guy at that. If he asks for something else, then fine, give it to him at something else. But really, most good mastering guys will want it at the format that you've been making it in. And so what I would suggest is, at the same time as you're doing that, you take the limiter off, just make sure that there's no clipping happening, so no digital clipping, because when you're pushing into the limiter, that will be handling any of that clipping. So when you take that off, make sure that the mix bus is kind of just getting up to, I don't know, -3, -4, something like that's quite nice. And then push the 4 dB onto the limiter. So that's where you're getting your level from. When you take that off, all of this won't clip. It will just sound really nice. And that's the way to present it to the mastering engineer. So there's no clipping. It's at the sample rate and bit depth that you've made it in. So if you want to know my preferred sample rate, it is 48K 32-bit, because I find that the bit depth gives more kind of juice and value than the sample rate. But most sample rates now can be delivered at 48K, and I find that my plugins and stuff, they all kind of work better at 48K. 96, it all gets a bit too clogged up and a bit boggy and a bit CPU heavy, and I don't think that you're getting as much out of it at 96. Not any more than you are at 48, if I'm totally honest, for my ears when I listen. But the difference between 16-bit and 32-bit is a lot better. So I would suggest doing 48, 32 from when you start your project. So my bonus tip is, how do you deliver a track that you know the mastering engineer is going to get it as loud as you want it to go, but also keep it super dynamic? Well, the key to this is space in the mix. It's like a picture. The white space around makes all of the colors really shine out. And that's the same with space and sound. So the more you can strip out of your mix and the more you can have space in there, the less instruments you can have, the less congested it's going to be. And that way, when you push into your limiters, when you push into that to get it loud, there's more space to take up, things can start pushing in, but you still keep a lot more dynamics. Now, if you want to learn a bit more about this and a bit more in depth, I did a whole video on it, whiteboarded it up as I'm talking, and you can see that here above. I'll put a little card there. So that will go into a bit more detail with you on how to get space in your mix so that you can get a nice, loud, dynamic mix, which is what most people really want. So have a look at that. Oh, sorry, not that side, that side. So there you have it. There's my top 5 tips plus one bonus tip. Thanks again to Craig Mack for giving us that idea. If you've got any ideas, or you want to hear anything, you want to know anything about mastering, you want me to do a video on it, then please put something in the comments below. Ask me anything you've got on this, and I'd love to hear any suggestions you have, if you're a mastering engineer or if you're a mix engineer, how you've got the best out of giving your tracks onto a mastering engineer. Before I go, let me just say a big thank you to everyone who comes up to me or speaks to me online and says how much they watch my channel, how much they like it, and how much information they got. That's superb. I love it. And please give me more of it, because it is the oxygen that keeps me going. And that's why I want your suggestions in the comments, so that I can answer your questions and help you get better sounding music, because that's what I'm here to help you do. So, and you know, give you anything that I've learned, because there's no point in keeping it in my head. I might as well share it. So if I can help you in some way, please let me know in the comments and let me know what you want me to talk about on my next video. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye.